Hey there guys, I am the Six Machine and welcome back to another Warhammer video. Today we're going to be doing another short little unit overview and review, and this time we're taking a look at the newest Dark Angels character to cross the Rubicon, the mighty Lazarus. Now before we start this, I will just say, like a lot of other people, I think we were expecting and hoping in the Dark Angels Psychic Awakening to get, much like the Space Wolves and the Blood Angels got, a remastered Primaris version of one of the classic characters of old, Azrael, Ezekiel, maybe even Asmodai, but instead we got a brand new, both lore-wise and rules-wise, character for the Dark Angels. So whether you're a fan of his lore or not, I think we can all agree he does have a pretty awesome model, and this review is of course going to be taking a look at his rules and not his fluff. As with the other videos, we'll be taking a look at his overall stat line, and then considering his offensive output and defensive abilities before trying to come to a decision as to whether he's a worthwhile addition to your army. So, let's get started. Lazarus comes in at a relatively cheap 110 points, and for that you get a stat line of Movement 6, Weapon and Ballistic Skill 2+, Strength Toughness 4, Wounds 6, 5 attacks, Leadership 9, and a 3-up save. For the points, it's actually a pretty good profile. Being a Primaris, he has that extra attack and wound, which really does help his survivability as well as his damage output. And then the rest being pretty much Captain stat line puts him in a decent spot for dishing out some damage to the enemy. Obviously a 2+ save would be really nice, but still, for his points, it's not a bad little profile at all. As far as what you would come to expect from a Primaris Captain or a Primaris Master, this is pretty much what I imagine you would see in your head if someone, asked you to imagine what that kind of stat line would be. There's no surprises in it, so I think it really is going to be his war gear and his special rules that make or break him as something you want to bring in your army. So let's go and take a look at those. He does of course come with the Angels of Death rule, bringing with it And They Shall Know No Fear, Bolter Discipline, Shock Assault, and Combat Doctrines. Some of these, like And They Shall Know No Fear and Bolter Discipline, won't affect him in the slightest, but again, Shock Assault and Combat Doctrines are pretty tasty ways to improve his damage output, giving him an extra attack, pushing him up to 6 when he charges, gets charged, or heroically intervenes, and then with the Combat Doctrines, he'll get that extra AP in the Assault Doctrine with his melee weapons and pistol. He doesn't have a gun that benefits from the Devastator or Tactical Doctrine, so those are rather moot, and to be honest, even his sword only gets a negligible benefit from the Assault Doctrine, already being AP -4, so bumping it up to AP -5 in the Assault Doctrine only really helps against those 2+ save models with no invulnerables, which are really quite few and far between. Still, you can't say it is, nothing, and if you do have to kind of try and push that clutch wound through on the Land Raider, you will be grateful for that AP -5 when it comes into play. He is a Dark Angel, so he gets the Grim Resolve special rule, which again isn't going to benefit him too much. As a single model, the morale phase is irrelevant to him anyway, and the +1 to hit when he's not moving is again something you shouldn't forget, because there are some situations when you're up against an enemy with -1 to hit on them, so it will bring you back to hitting on 2s, but for the majority of his opponents, his native 2+ to hit in both melee and with shooting is going to be what he's using anyway, so the Dark Angel's +1 to that roll won't even come into effect. In addition to that, being a Dark Angel, he gains the new Sons of the Lion rule, which is essentially the Dark Angel's super doctrine. Now, Lazarus doesn't benefit from the Speed of the Raven or the Implacable, as he is neither Ravenwing nor does he have the Deathwing keywords, although it is worth mentioning now he does have the Inner Circle keyword, but that does mean that he benefits from the Fire Discipline ability. So what this does, if you aren't aware, is that it allows you to fire rapid fire and assault weapons in melee if you're in the Tactical Doctrine. Now, as we said, Lazarus has his sword and his pistol, so he doesn't have any rapid fire or assault weapons, so in essence, Lazarus doesn't benefit from any of the Dark Angel's super doctrine abilities, which is a shame. It would have been cool if he had the Deathwing keyword, I think, to grant him those rerolls to wound in the Assault Doctrine against characters or enemies with more than 8 wounds, but alas, it's not the end of the world, to be honest. The Dark Angel super doctrine abilities are generally really good, but the fact that Lazarus can't take advantage of them is just a minor inconvenience. What is really good, and it's worth going back for a second as I just mentioned it, is that he does have the inner circle ability. So he is actually really quite survivable because he's benefiting from that can never be wounded on less than a 4+. And we all know about this rule that the Deathwing now have, and I'm sure we all agree it is a very, very great ability to have. On your Terminators, it's fantastic, but I think arguably it's even better, in my opinion, that a lot, I don't know if it's all of them, but most of them, most of your Dark Angel characters have the inner circle rule, so they get to benefit from that basically permanent transhuman physiology as well. So it's really good when an enemy, Smash Captain or Knight gets into your lines and tries to squish your characters, because it makes them a lot tougher for your opponents to crack. In terms of his other special rules and abilities, he has the Iron Halo for that 4-up invulnerable save, much as you would expect from a captain or a master, and he also has the Rites of Battle aura, giving a friendly core Dark Angels unit within 6 inches those lovely reroll 1s to hit, which is always a really nice ability to have, but especially with Dark Angels when you can be hitting on 2s with a lot of your stuff. If you're standing still, it really does act as a very, very good force multiplier for the Dark Angels specifically. Finally, Lazarus has got 2 bespoke, unique special rules. He has Intractable Will, which is very much like the Ancient's Banner or the Only in Death Does Duty End stratagem, and basically means that when Lazarus is killed, if he's in engagement range of an enemy unit, he can be selected to fight before he's removed. Notably, compared to Only in Death Does Duty End, this states that it can be done even if Lazarus has already fought in the fight phase. So if he gets a charge off, he can be pumping out 6 attacks, and then if the enemy kills him on the return swings, he can really make your enemy suffer by dishing out a further 6 attacks, which, as we'll see in a minute, can do a fair chunk of damage. It's a really good way to kind of dissuade people from engaging Lazarus, because they know that he's got a good number of attacks, and even if they kill him before he gets to swing, he will still get to swing, and he can do a good amount of damage to them before he's removed, and they basically can't avoid that damage. He will always get to do at least some of his attacks against your opponent. He may not get to do all 12 if the opponent swings first and kills him, but he will definitely get to do at least 6 of his attacks before the enemy can know that their squad or their character is safe from return swings. His other unique special rule is his helmet, which is called the Spirit Shield Helm. This provides an aura that, kind of like Azrael with his Lion Helm, affects Dark Angel units within 6 inches. Unlike the Lion Helm, this just states Dark Angel's units. It isn't restricted to infantry or bikers, so it can be used on vehicles and that sort of thing, which is pretty cool. It's overall not quite as good as the Lion Helm, in my opinion. Instead of giving that flat invulnerable save against shooting, it instead just gives you a 5-up shrug against mortal wounds, and for Lazarus himself, it gives him +1 to that roll, which essentially gives him a 4-up to ignore mortal wounds. I mean, it's still very, very good, especially as it doesn't state something like psychic mortal wounds or anything like that. It is just mortal wounds, period. So not only is it things like smite, but it's also various weapons that do mortal wounds on 6s, vehicle explosions, bombs. There really is quite a large number of things in the game at the moment that do mortal wounds. So this really does give your battle line some solid bonus survivability against those kinds of attacks, and for Terminators especially, he's a really nice buffing unit for them, because one of the best ways to get through the incredible 1-up save and 4-up invulnerable save that Storm Shield Terminators have is by pumping mortal wounds into them. So plonking Lazarus down with a unit of 10 Thunderhammer Storm Shield Terminators will massively buff their already obnoxious survivability, especially if they're Dark Angel Terminators where they can't be wounded on less than a 4+ as well. One final thing to talk about before we look at his weapons in particular is his Warlord trait. He gets the Brilliant Strategist trait if he is your Warlord, which lets you select a friendly Dark Angels unit within 6 inches in the command phase, and you can choose if you wish for it to basically be back 1 doctrine. So if the Tactical Doctrine is in effect, they can move back to Devastator. If the Assault Doctrine is in effect, they can essentially being tactical. It's not a bad Warlord trait and can be helpful if you need to keep some, shooty heavy weapons with that extra -1 AP for a turn, or you want a squad that's stuck in combat in turn 4 to be able to shoot into the enemy, and then switching, back to tactical will allow your Green Wing to do that with the Sons of the Lion ability. It's very much a buffing force multiplying ability rather than making Lazarus himself any more killy or survivable. So it does let you use Lazarus as a good warlord to keep your army quite fluid and give yourself some options as you're going through the various doctrines. I wouldn't say he's definitely the person you want to make your warlord all the time, but if you do bring Lazarus and you want to make him your warlord, this trait it's not a bad one to have. It can be quite useful for the Dark Angels, especially because their doctrines and their super doctrines do kind of change between the Devastator, the Tactical, and the Assault Doctrine. So now we're on to his damage output, and as I've said before, it's mainly melee where Marine HQs shine, and Lazarus is no exception. He has a bolt pistol for his ranged attacks. That's it. Nothing to write home about, and we can pretty much just move straight on to his sword, which is called Enmity's Edge. This is something you have to consider with Lazarus, especially when you factor in his Spirit Shield helm as well. It's something of a niche weapon. He is very anti-psyker, anti-mortal wound focused, and so his sword is pretty much a slightly better mastercrafted power sword, coming in at +2 strength, -4 AP, and a flat 2 damage, which means that on the charge he's getting 6 attacks at strength 6, cutting through 3-up saves completely, and then insta-killing 2 wound infantry. So I mean, so far so good. It's not a bad profile. Hitting on 2s, he's going to get a good 5 or so hits, and then probably kill at least 3, maybe 4 Marines. But where he really shines is when you look at the abilities of his sword. Against Psyker models, the damage 2 is doubled to an incredible 4 damage per wound, which is really, really strong. And when you're up against the right target, will allow you to insta-kill anything from, Guard Astropaths to Chaos Masters of Possession to Orc Weird Boys. So whilst it won't come up every game, and when your opponent knows what Lazarus can do, he will probably do everything he can to move his Psykers away from Master Lazarus. But there are a lot of armies where he will definitely have a target at some point. Most Chaos or Demons or Orc armies tend to bring Psykers. Eldar obviously have lots of them. Tyranids tend to have lots of Psykers throughout their lists. And, if you find yourself up against an army like Grey Knights or Thousand Suns, then Lazarus is going to have a really, really good time just absolutely chunking wounds through their Psyker units. To put it this way, against someone like Mortarion, and obviously just take this with, the fact that it's never going to happen, but if the stars were to align, Lazarus could get his 6 attacks in, each doing 3 damage instead of 4, thanks to the disgustingly resilient rule, and then even if Mortarion were to kill him in return, do another 6 attacks for an absolute potential damage total of 36 wounds against Mortarion. Now, as I said, this is never going to happen. But for a more reasonable example, against something like, say, a Demon Prince, you can expect Lazarus to put through around 1.6 unsaved wounds for an average of, 6.6 wounds or so, something like that. But of course, if you got lucky or saved a command point reroll and got through those 2 unsaved wounds, it would just do a flat 8 damage and insta-kill that Demon Prince, and that is on the first swing. If the Demon Prince survived and then managed to kill Lazarus with his swings back, you could use Intractable Will and do another 6 attacks and pretty much guarantee that even if Lazarus got taken out, he would be taking that Demon Prince down with him. As I said, it is very niche, and there will be some games where your opponent has no Psykers whatsoever, but it's an ability which has a lot of potential. And also, what I quite like is that it, along with his helmet, are quite fluffy abilities for Lazarus and his lore. And as I said, I'm not going to go into Lazarus, his lore, or look at that at all, but he doesn't like Psykers, so it's cool that he has 2 bits of war gear and rules that are aimed at negating the damage they can do and also taking them out that much better. I think it's nice when characters' lore is reflected well in their rules and their war gear, and for Lazarus, I think Games Workshop, to their credit, have done a good job of doing that. Now, obviously, you can just get a normal Primaris Captain or Primaris Master for cheaper. They come in at 90 points base compared to the 110 for Lazarus, but for those extra points, the regular Master doesn't have anywhere near as good melee output, requiring 5 points to get the Mastercrafted Power Sword, and also, notably, they don't come with the Inner Circle keyword, which is huge for Lazarus's, survivability. Now, they can get the Inner Circle keyword for 15 points with the Rites of Initiation, but then you've just bumped up your Primaris Master to 110 points, which is the same as Lazarus. And you've traded the fact that the Primaris Master can choose a Warlord trait and gains the Deathwing keyword for Intractable, but what you get with Lazarus instead is a much better melee weapon, especially against Psykers, a better and free Only in Death Does Duty End ability, and genuinely one of the better anti-mortal wound defenses in the entire game at the moment. So I mean, yes, there are pros and cons to both, but I think overall Lazarus is a really valid option if you want to bring a master to your army, and especially if you know that your opponent may have some Psykers, or even just one or two, or some abilities that do mortal wounds, things like flyers, or they have a weapon profile that does mortal wounds on 6s. If your opponent has access to those, or that they're bringing those, I really do think that Lazarus gets exponentially better as a way to counter those enemy attacks and those enemy units compared to just a regular Primaris Master. And I mean, that kind of also really covers his personal defenses as well. As I said, a 2-up save would be nice, but with 6 wounds, a 3-up save, and a 4-up invulnerable, as well as that 4-up shrug that he gets against mortal wounds, because he gets the +1 to the to his Spirit Shield helm roll, and the fact that he is in a circle so he can't be wounded on less than a 4+. He's not impossible to put down, but he certainly can withstand a lot better compared to a regular Primaris Master or a lot of other characters, especially if your opponent is planning on bringing lots of mortal wound spam to try and get through pesky and vulnerable saves. Lazarus really will last a lot longer than I think your opponent will be expecting him to. And as we said before, I think his defense is also improved quite nicely by the fact that if your opponent knows about Intractable Will, they really aren't going to want to get into combat with Lazarus in case they end up suffering, 12 strength 6 attacks back in one single fight phase. So there we go, that was a quick look at Master Lazarus of the Dark Angels. Overall, I really love his models, and I think that his rules they're good, they're very good when they come into effect, but they are possibly a bit too niche if you really don't know what army you may be coming up against. So there we go, that was just a very quick look at Master Lazarus of the Dark Angels. Overall, I really love his model, and I think his rules are very good. They're very good at what they are aimed at doing. They are possibly a bit too niche if you really don't know what army you may be coming up against. But if you're playing against friends or in a meta where Psykers or Mortal Wound spam are relatively common, I think he is definitely better than just bringing a basic Primaris Master. Obviously, being a Dark Angel player, you may be looking towards things like Talon Masters or Chaplains on Bikes or Librarians instead for your HQ choices, but if you are running a classic good old-fashioned Greenwing list or even a Deathwing list, I think Lazarus is a very solid choice, bringing a genuinely decent little bubble of survivability, as well as a very scary counterpunch should any enemies, especially Psykers, get too close to your lines. But what do you think of Lazarus? Have you bought him in any of your games of 9th edition so far? I'd love to know how you found him and how he performed, whether he was as survivable as you thought he was, or despite the Spirit Shield helm, did he just end up dying very quickly? And how was his damage output? Did you manage to take advantage of his potential 9 attacks in a single fight phase, or did Intractable Will not come up as often as you thought it might? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, please leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more Warhammer related videos from me. Until next time though, I'll catch you later guys.